Okay, morning everyone. 10:15, so we might sort of get the, I guess, the admin stuff out of the way at the start. So morning everyone. This is the second of 4 sessions that are running today for Paddock to Reef training, and it's one of 9 that we're running over today and tomorrow. Basically on the data collection side of the Paddock to Reef program. So my name's Paul Humphreys. So I work in the DAF Paddock to Reef team, MPA team with Adam and Emily. And I'll facilitate this session for Adam. This one particular is the P2R Cane questions and the Cane Projector. And Adam Northey, who you can see up there on your screen, is delivering the session. So before we start, we'll just like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners and custodians of the land that we're meeting on today. That's the past, present, emerging leaders. So the land that Adam and myself are on is the Capricorn Coast and Rockhampton region. So they're the Drumble people that we have here. Drumble land covers an area from the Styx River north of Rockhampton. It's about 130 k's north of Rocky, goes down to Raglan Creek in the south, out to Westwood. It's about 50 k's west of Rockhampton, and sort of curves back around to the southwest towards the base of Mount Morgan. So that's their traditional land. And just acknowledge and pay respect to your own traditional owners that in your relative areas. A couple other rules around the housekeeping and the meeting in general. So it's not particularly large, I don't think. How many we've got? So 30 people. So it's not a huge meeting, but obviously if you can keep everything muted, unless you've got a question, just to keep the background noise down. If you have any questions, if you ask just to put it in the chat to start with. If you feel like it's really pressing, just maybe raise a hand and we'll see if we can address it at the time. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And feel free to either leave your camera on or off, whatever suits you. So I'll hand over to Adam to run the session.
Thanks, Paul. I'm not on mute. Nope, that's good. Right, thanks, Paul. G'day, everyone. Yes, I'm Adam Northey. I work Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, Queensland Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, part of the greater Paddock to Reef team, and specifically part of so DAF has responsibility under Paddock to Reef to do the management practice adoption stuff. Today I'm going to have a bit of a chat about cane questions and cane projector. But first, I guess just a bit of background about myself. I have been in this role for a bit over 7 years now. Before that, I worked for FBA, so background in NRM, land key groups and that sort of stuff. So I sort of come at this from the NRM side of things, and then have moved into this management practice adoption side of things. Right, let's start. Okay, so I'm going to go to really set the scene around the questions and projector and what we're trying to achieve. I'm going to start at this document here. So the Reef Water Quality Improvement Plan, which I think Billy touched on this morning, went over, basically guides, the hundreds of millions of dollars worth of public funding has gone into trying to achieve the objectives in this plan. So this plan here has a number of levels to it. Billy Gordon this morning spoke around the human dimension. So this is the one at the very base there, the blue one. I'm going to talk a lot about in this brown area here in the midsection, and in particular the one on the box on the far left, this target which reads 90% of land in priority areas under grazing, horticulture, banana, sugarcane and other broadacre cropping are managed using best management practice systems for water quality outcomes, soil nutrient and pesticides. So that's That's the one that we have responsibility under monitoring and reporting against. And we also have responsibility not only reporting and monitoring and reporting against this, but also informing the modelling teams who then of the things to model, who then do the modelling around these light blue ones, right? 60% adoption. So, cane questions. I'll start first about, we'll have a bit of a talk about the cane questions, how we manage the data, and then we'll jump down. I'll talk a bit about Projector after we have a break about halfway through, and the differences between what we do in P2R and what happens in Projector, because it's really important that they're not the same thing. Okay, so cane questions. Like I said, this box here is the one we're really interested in, and really the data that we collect on this plays two roles. Okay, so one, the questions we ask are about informing how we're traveling towards this target, and the second part is about modeling and how we're moving towards these targets here. Now, you will have noticed when I flicked up, let's go back. When I flicked up this slide here, you notice that the WQIP is from 2017 to 2022. So basically it winds up this year, and everything goes through a review every 5 years. So whenever the WQIP runs its course, all the targets are under review. So the 60% reduction in DIM, the 90% adoption of best practice, all of that sort of stuff's under review. That's the normal process. Middle of last year, the ministers, so the Australian and the Queensland ministers, announced that the MPA target, so the 90% adoption of best practice target, the review of that will be brought forward. So the review of that started mid last year. It's currently being handled by an external group to us called Alluvium. And there's a link there to the page they set up, which gives updates about that. So it's independent of us. We are involved in a way as more advisors than anything, but it is totally independent of us. They'll have some draft targets ready in the next few weeks, ready to go to public consultation shortly. But yeah, that link there was where all of the updates, that sort of stuff. There's contacts on there if you need to contact particular people, if you want to provide updates back to Alluvium, all the information's there. Okay, so cane questions. So the cane questions represent management practices which have the biggest impact on water quality. So these aren't all of the practices that have an impact on water quality, but what we've tried to do is go, okay, what are the biggest ones? They're grouped into some categories. So practices that influence the risk of water quality around soil management, the risk of water quality around nutrient management, the risk of water quality of pesticide management, and also relevant to the vertican is the risk around irrigation management. So I was saying before, they serve two main purposes. One is to inform progress towards that 90% best practice target. And the other one we then use to we take those questions and we do some analysis on them and then hand them over to, or hand the analysis of those questions over to the modeling team so that they can model the impact of the changes. Right, so what I'll do now is we'll just run through some questions. So soil management, what we're looking at here is
hey, Adam,
these. Yep.
Sorry, just there is a question just before we change topics, just regarding, and it's the question is particularly about the Burnett Mary, but it does affect most catchments and commodities we deal with. It's just where you pick up discrepancies in land use. The example used is Burnett Mary, where there's been a big change in cane. You know, where do we go for the, I guess, the latest information on land area and that sort of thing? obviously because QLUMP's quite a bit out of date as well, and then there's also been rapid land use change.
Where do we get correct information?
Yeah.
No, for this process here, the land area is probably not that significant. Like getting, there's land area, whether it's 80,000 or 40,000, is probably not that significant for running through new targets. The question will be around which going through this process will be for the new target about adoption of a particular practice. It'll be making sure that we get what's the current adoption right, and then how much adoption are we likely to see. And those adoptions will likely be expressed in terms of percentages. So if you're saying current adoption of particular practice is 50%, you think we can maybe get to 70% in a few years' time. They're the important things, whether it means, 20,000 hectares or 40,000 hectares probably isn't so important. Hope that answers your question, Matt. Move on. Okay, so soil management. So we've got we answer these questions here around soil management. So green cane trash blanketing, really we're looking to see what we're trying to find out here is how long the trash is retained. So if you don't green cane trash blanket, so a lot of the vertican where they burn, they're not retaining the trash. Elsewhere, most people are retaining the trash through the returns, and then the last one is retained through into the fallow. So we're trying to work out when cover is on the ground around risky periods. So when it's raining and it's wet, no cover sort of increases the risk of sediment losses. So that's what we're sort of trying to find out here. Question 2 is around machinery management, and really here what we're trying to work out is how much of the field has had a wheel or a truck or something like that run over that field. So having how much of the field is run over. So if you look at these top ones here, we're really looking at percentage of the block in traffic, so percentage of the block not run over. So row width, again, is sort of about trying to work out, it's trying to triangulate between these couple of things. So, if we've got all machines running at a particular width here, we know that, most harvesters are running 1.8 sort of wheel width. So we can sort of try and work out how much of their bed is trafficked. So fallow management here, probably the thing to really focus in on here is around the legume and other crops. So we have 4.3, which is sort of opportunity crops. So a lot of people will go, oh yeah, if all the planets align, I'll try and grow a legume. We know that sometimes you just can't get a legume, it doesn't rain, it's too much, or whatever sort of thing. There's times when you can't get a legume in or an alternative crop. So 4.4 and 4.5 are really about that. I'm going to plant a legume unless something happens, and I can. So the intent is, I run through however many returns, have a fallow, and in that fallow, I'm going to plant a legume. Now, whether you do or don't is kind of not the intent of this question, but that's what we're trying to get here. Percentage of your plant cane is usually replant cane. So we're talking about player replant here, so no fallow. And then the number of passes in question 6. I see I just had a question come up. Question 1, the burden where traces returns often happens in late returns where crops get lighter. So based on size of crop origin, and in the future can come to a number. Yeah, okay. So question in here, question 1, in the Sugarcane where trash is retained, it often happens in late returns when crops get lighter. So based on size of crops and lodging. Maybe in the future review, come to a percentage number rather than a crop age based on approach. Yeah, that's good feedback. Yeah, probably also worth mentioning with the updates to the target, there is a possibility that these questions will have some slight updates to them. Depending on what the new targets will be, will mean we'll want to know slightly different things. So everything sort of comes part of that update with alluvium is also update to water quality risk frameworks. So which means the question may need to slightly change things. So things like this is really good feedback. But we need to, yeah, have a bit of a think about that too. So thank you. Question from Matt. Question still based around cane only system, no method for multi-species integrated farming systems, which include horticulture and or grain crops in the fallow. The series of questions leads to poor assumptions of what's happening in an integrated farming system. Yeah, Matt, I do agree with you, particularly in the Burnett, like where cane is just one of the crops that a particular farmer grows. Yeah, I do agree with you there, and it's probably something we should address further. And you know, through this 5-year update, we'll hopefully be in that part of the world talking to you guys and others around those sort of, you know, what are some improvements that can be done around the frameworks, but also around modelling assumptions and that sort of stuff. Okay, so nutrient management. Now, this one here, what we're really trying to work out. So in nutrient management, the biggest risk to water quality is nitrogen that's been applied that doesn't end up in the crop. So if it's not in the crop, then it's available for the water to take it somewhere else, either in runoff or deep drainage. So what we're doing here in question 7, A and B, is trying to work out what is an average yield for a farm and what's the average N rate. So average is a really tricky thing, and we get asked, you know, oh, you know, this year the growers, you know, this block's with cyclone, cyclone's a bad example, but you know, we haven't had as good a season, so we dropped the rate down a little bit. You know, we didn't have any rain or something like that. So what we're probably looking for in these questions here is like, okay, over the last 5 or 10 years, what would you average out the yield or average out the rate in these particular areas? It's, yeah, we know that it's going to move around. And probably the other thing to point out here, which we get asked about a lot, is if you've got a farm that has 2 really different soil types in it. So, you know, something might be a bit lower, more fertile, or, you know, gets waterlogged or something like that. So it has a really different yield to suffer a little bit higher. Best bet is actually to split it into 2 farms and represent those more accurate rather than go, this 100 hectares managed as 1. We can handle, you know, as small a polygon as you want to draw. It really comes down to practicality. So if you want to go, hard and put every single block in and fill out this survey for the, you know, 50 different blocks on a farm, that's totally fine, but it's probably an unreasonable request for most people. You know, 1 block, if the farm is managed sort of fairly uniform and the soils are all pretty similar, then 1 block's, you know, in most cases is going to be fine. And then again, you know, phosphorus, how much mud's applied and sort of where. So really this first question here, this 9, is really trying to work out, and we did a pretty poor job, and we'll review it in the update, about, you know, is it just applied at plan or is it applied routinely to all or a lot of the farm? Okay, so pesticide management. Now, these ones will likely get a bit of an update going. Well, we'll probably end up with a two-tiered system. So as a lot of people know, in pesticides, in the new water quality risk framework, the current water quality risk framework, we have gone, in the previous ones, it was about pesticide load, whereas the current one is really about the impact, or the number of species that are impacted or not impacted in the water, which really comes down to the toxicity of the pesticide and the concentration in the water. So load doesn't normally, like, load's interesting, but it doesn't sort of tell you everything. For instance, some big systems can have quite low. So the Fitzroy, for instance, has had in the past quite high loads of tebuthioron in it, so grasslands. Tebuthioron actually has a pretty low ecotoxicity in water. So the impact of those high loads on aquatic plants, or aquatic animals and plants, is actually quite a bit lower. Whereas if you have medium loads of say pesticides, which are imidacloprid, for instance, which is about killing invertebrates, it can have quite a big impact on invertebrates in the water. So it's about toxicity and concentration. So these questions here were designed originally around trying to work out how much chemical went on, and not necessarily about the chemicals that did go on. So in the future, we want to really know about the chemicals that do go on. So we want to try and come up with a way that, ideally, we'd love to know product rate and the time it's put on and the method it's applied. But it's a bit of a balancing act for us between, what is not too onerous on you guys, because your role is to work with landholders and help them make improvements and all that sort of stuff. Reporting should be just a really minor thing that you've got to you should be doing. It shouldn't be, your main role shouldn't be reporting. So we want to make sure that the stuff we ask isn't too onerous and too hard. We're not just spending all your time on reporting. We want you spending all your time on working with landholders. So we don't want to be too onerous, but we also need to know a certain amount of information so we can be confident to be able to represent that properly. So it's a bit of a work in progress. It'll change soon, but we've got to try and work out, what we have now is this, and we'll work out a way with it. Okay, so irrigation method. This is really based on or mostly only applicable to the Burdekin. Most of the other regions don't have, just about nobody has the level of irrigation that the Burdekin has. So the model is only run irrigation in the Burdekin. In the other regions, it's not run. It's there is some, I believe there is some recycle pits modelled in the Burnett, but that's kind of it. Everywhere else doesn't actually model irrigation. Okay, so another couple from Matt I seen just popped up.
Yeah, it's just an extra, I was going to say, just an extra point on pesticides, if you want to address that.
Where are we? Okay. There's things from Matt. My understanding is in the model, focus on N reduction in areas such as BM where we can irrigate better. Why not include increased yield? Yield is driven by water through probability. Yeah, so Matt, the way that that we analyze the data is actually, and I'll go into it in a little bit, but it's actually sensitive to N reduction and yield increase. So that's, we can capture both. So that's where, increasing water. So the Burnett, Mackay's another great example. Increase the water, you get a yield increase for the same inputs, so less surplus N in the system, so surplus N, so therefore you should get less in. So also retailers do not. Okay, at the moment, there is nowhere easily information available for question 14. What's question 14? Oh, yeah. So question 14 is about the pesticide selection. So yeah, question 14 here was when we redesigned these questions in 16, I think, we recognized that there was a change and that the selection of pesticide was going to be is probably more important than all of this other stuff. You know, going from harder old chemistry to some of this newer chemistry could have quite a substantial improvement on water quality. The thing is that we just didn't really know how to capture it properly. So this was our attempt to put something in there. You know, our confidence around the data reported is a little bit less. Okay. Yeah, so okay, question 15, grub management. This does not differentiate between granular and liquid imidacloprid, which is misleading. Liquid being applied yearly versus some granular products which provide control for multiple years. Yeah, I agree too. So, you know, this, as I was saying before, this is trying to get a bit of an idea about how much was applied, but it didn't do a good job, and will be changed up going forward. Like I said, you know, we really want to try and get an idea of what's applied and at what rates. And imidacloprid is a great example. So, you know, granules versus liquid, you know, totally different rates, different timings, that sort of stuff, and different risk profiles for loss. Okay, so analysing the data. So each one of those questions that come in have a weighting overall. So question 1 here, the influence of trash blanketing on the erosion risk is about 40%. So cover is pretty much the king in terms of sediment loss. So this one gets a 40%. So then within side of that, each one of these questions. So you look at question 1 is 0.4. Question 1 is 0.4. Question 2 is 0.15, 3, 0.05, 0.2, 0.2. So they all add up to 100. So 1 to 6 gives you a score will give you 100. So they add up to 100% of the risk that we're analysing here. So inside of each of these questions, each of these categories, we have the individual questions, and each of these individual questions get a score. So, you know, question 1.1 gets a 0, 1.2 gets a 30, 1.3 gets a 40. So that represents the score. So what we ask people to do, as you guys know, you go through, you answer all of these different questions, and you end up with a total score out of 100. So this case here, if we run through there, we get a 22 out of 100. You then go through and change. So in this case, I work with this particular grower, and they're now going to start trash blanketing. So they now get a new total score out of 100, and that being 42. So we went from 22 to 42 here. Now we have these categories that sit. So these are these bands here. So you'll see here A, B, C, and D, but then also there's a couple of things, A partial, AP, so A partial, BP, B partial, and CP, C partial. So this is originally the whole program was designed around an A, B, C, D. We recognized that it wasn't granular enough, and there was changes happening that we couldn't quite represent. So we added in a few more, a C partial and a B partial, and A where we could. So that each of these categories would break the bands up in terms of, okay, well, we look at the combinations of practices that we would call a B. What's the score ranges? We're going to see the combination of practices that we call an A. What's the score ranges? So when we look at those scores, so originally 22, okay, so that puts them into this class. So for soil, we're going to say that they started off in this C partial or D plus band. So the original risk rating is that C partial. We've made the changes. They've jumped up to a 42, puts them up to the next band. So they get a new risk rating of that C. And this is how we do soil and herbicide management at the moment, and also irrigation management. Now, nitrogen is a little bit different. So we use a thing, well, that we call nitrogen loss risk index. So I should put an index on there, which is really a ratio between the applied N and an expected yield. Okay, so we make in our calculations, we use a farm average. So we make an assumption that 20% of the cropped area is plant cane and 80% is ratoon cane. Okay, so this is not always the case, but we have to work. If we're working on thousands of areas, we have to have some rules of thumb in here. Currently, we have 6 bands. We are working on having more, and I'll go through that a little bit later. But currently, there's those 6 bands. So A full, B partial, C full, C partial, and D full. And then these are the bands. So, and then you'll see over on the left-hand side, we have ranges for this nitrogen loss ratio. Okay. So we work through an example here. If we have a plant cane N rate of 120 and a ratoon rate of 140, plant cane yield of 90, a ratoon of 80, our average N rate is 120 times 0.02 or 20%, and plus the 140, so the ratoon rate at 80%, which gives us an average farm yield of 136, average farm N rate, sorry, of 136. And then we do the same thing for yield. So 92, 80.8 is 82. And to work out this nitrogen loss risk, we got rate divided by yield, so 136 divided by 82, which gives us 1.65, and that puts us into this CP range there. Then, if we increase the yield, we obviously increase this 82, which changes the ratio there, or if we decrease the rate, we decrease this 32, which again changes this ratio. So this is how it's sensitive to going up and down. Now we are working on a process of putting more bands in here. There's some updates in Projector I'll talk about in that. And we're trying to work out in the modeling whether we even need bands at all. So there's some testing to be done in the modeling to, try and get rid of these bands, because if you look at these ratings here, like so 1.1 to 1.3, you drop your N rate in 20, just under 20 kilos, so 18 kilos, you'll still sit within this rate here. And, essentially what this is saying is, say a 15 kilo N rate reduction, or conversely, whatever that, that works out in terms of a yield increase, is giving you no nitrogen saving, which we know is not true. We know that if you put less on, there's less available to be lost. So we're trying to work out some bands in between here. Okay. So practice change. So we have all of these projects come in. So in sugarcane, generally we get somewhere between, I'm going to say 1,000 and 2,000 individual farms or blocks or whatever reported across all of the projects. So we get generally 1,000 to 2,000 individual farms each year get reported to us across. I think we worked it out the other day, and there's about 120 or 130 programs currently operating across all of the reef space. I'm not sure, we didn't look at how many are just cane related, but quite a percentage of them are just cane related. So what we're seeing is all of these hectares coming in from C to B or B partial and from B partial to an A and all this sort of stuff. So we're seeing hectares move around.
Just a question there, Adam, relating to how the 15 to 20% of land that would be in fallow is accommodated in that N rate stuff.
Yeah, so
Donald?
we're talking about just the crop area. So the model actually goes, if you have 100 hectares, right? The model will say, particularly if you've indicated that you have a fallow, the model will say, well, of that 100 hectares, some of that's doesn't have a crop on. So we're just assuming that, say, 80% of that area has a crop on it. So for those calculations and for the questions around yield and rate, ignore the fallow in there. So I'll talk about the modelling just in a little bit, which will help to make it a bit more sensible. Okay, so as I was saying before, the first thing that we need to do is we need to go, okay, we've got all of these practice changes coming in here. We need to report against that target, this target here of 90% of land in priority areas, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so in this, we have best management practice systems for water quality. Now, and that comes in as an A or B, and this A partial come into it. So inside this green box is the areas that contribute to this target. So if we look here, this project here that went from a B partial in nutrient all the way through to an A, it's contributing to this target. This one here in herbicide that went from a C to a B, contributing to this target. Now, this soil one here that went from a C to a B partial, and irrigation that went from a D to a C. Now, there's practice change there, but these aren't contributing towards this particular target. So we model all of this gets modeled, and all of this has a water quality impact. These ones here they're not going to show up as terms of, the area has increased by whatever percentage. So we'll see times where there's a modeled water quality increase, but not necessarily an increase in the area under best practice, or there'll be quite a large water quality increase and quite a small area under best practice increase sort of thing. So they kind of don't always line up to each other, which is probably most of the reason why the MPA targets had to be reviewed and why the ministers wanted them reviewed earlier. There was starting to get a little bit of disconnect between this target and the water quality targets. Pesticide targets going to change. Last report card target. Okay, so pesticides in the report card have actually been modelled not modelled. They've been monitored for the last few years. So the water, like when we and land's a good one there. I can't remember off the top of my head what it was previously, but let's say it was 98% protected and now it's 99%. So that means target's met. Obviously, something's happened in that catchment where particularly there's just less pesticides were entering into the water. That wasn't captured by us from memory. I don't think we had any pesticide reporting in there. You've got to remember that our data is really only come from you guys. So if one of you guys or one of your colleagues has gone out and worked with a landholder to change a practice, that gets reported to us. We know 100%. We know that there is people doing things outside of this reef space off their own bat. They look at it, and, they do it like a lot of people making practice. What farmers do, they're making practice changes on their own back all the time. So we absolutely know that happens, and we try and reset our adoption estimates every 5 years as well. So if you sort of followed the Paddock to Reef adoption estimates over the years, you've seen that particularly last time we reset, so 4 or 5 years ago now, there was quite a big shift in the adoption estimates in sugarcane, particularly in pesticide management, not pesticide, in nutrient management. And that was sort of to reflect, better understanding of what was going on, and to pick up where there was adoption of new of better practices, but also disadoption. So farms change hands, and the new farmers got more debt, so runs things a little bit harder or something like that, and practices aren't quite as good as the previous farmer. Okay.
We got about 5 minutes left, Adam, until the scheduled Q&A session. So
okay.
I don't know how much longer we got to go, or we can just run into that.
Yeah, well, we can get into it. Okay, so this tells us how much has moved into best practice. So these are all the hectares moving to best practice. So there's farms there, 100, 500 hectares, that sort of stuff moving around. So how do we know if we've hit this 90% adoption yet? So at the beginning of each of those WQIP rounds, we go out in the industry, we go out into the world, and we try and get an estimation of how the area is managed, in terms of what percentage of the area is managed using these different combinations of practices. So if we look here for, I think this is nutrient management, you'll see, we thought originally there was 15% managed at A and 38 at D, and 24 at C, and that sort of stuff. Now, we have an estimation of the area, so this percentage divided by the total area of in a particular region. We have these hectares. Now we have all of these hectares coming in, and they're moving from one area to another. So, they come in as a D, and then they move up to a C, and that sort of stuff. So we have all of these projects reported. And like I said, there's 1,000+ each year coming in like this. What that does is it means that we end up with different estimated areas. So if we take, remove 500 hectares from this D and we put it into C, we now have a different area, different total in each of these areas. So once we've gone through a reporting round, we re-aggregate everything. So we go, okay, all these hectares move around. What is the estimation of area now accounting for these moving ones? Then we recalculate percentages based off this area. So you'll see here, we originally started with, in best practice, 22%, 15 plus 17, and now that's jumped up to 29 based on all these practice changes that happen in 1 year. And this becomes the area that we report in the report part, in best practice for nutrient. So that's the first job around reporting against that 90% target. So that's how we get that. We were at 22 and now we're at 29. Next part of our job is modeling. So we get these combinations of practices for soil. We do it again. This should be nutrient slide, but I didn't put one up. We do it for nutrient, we do it for pesticide, we do it for irrigation. So if we do this over all of those, we end up with all of these different combinations. We end up with an assessment for each of the practices. Okay, so that then looks like this. We have a farm that is managed. The soil as a C, the nutrient as a B partial, herbicide as a B, irrigation as a C. That then gets converted into a code, which aligns with one of the sim modeling runs that Mel Shaw's team and Mark Silburn's team look after. If we go through, so if we go through this again, so this tells us, okay, this here is how we believe this farm is managed in terms of different combinations of practices. If something changes here, say the nutrient moved from this B partial to a B full, we end up with a different modeling code here. So this would change, and it represent a different upsim model. So this is, I'm just going to touch on upsim because it's probably important to realise how it's managed. I'm not a modeller. Mel Shaw, Mark Silburn are the guys you need to talk to about this. So AppSim in this case is a daily model run. It's run over 40 years. So what that means is that every day for 40 years, something's happened on that farm. It's using real life, bomb rainfall data. So there's weather stations that go back, 100 plus years in a lot of the regions. So we kind of know that on this particular date, 30 years ago, it rained, and this particular date it rained, we had this amount and that sort of stuff. So we're using real life rainfall data. It uses combinations of practices, which are kind of set for each region. So if we say in the model, we say something like minimum till, what that means in the Burnett is different to the Tully, for instance. So what happened was Mel's team went around and sat down with a lot of these regional experts. So there'd be people on here. I know there's people on here that were a part of that process years ago, sat down and said, okay, well, what's an A, what's an A tillage? What's best practice tillage here? And it might be, this sort of combination. And what's the worst case? Well, it might be this. So, might be whole heap of tillage in the D, and then gradually moves to less tillage in sort of the A. These are currently being reviewed as well. So they sort of fall in behind the new management targets. So if we have a new management target, what we need to know and what AppSim needs to tell us will be slightly different. So once there's some draft targets out there, I was talking to Mel the other day. Mel's plan is to come and try and get back into the regions, set up, talk to people and go, okay, do we still think that, best or, this level of tillage is still appropriate, or has technology changed and people aren't doing this anymore? What are things that are missing out of the model that we need to represent? So Mel, we'll hopefully see Mel and her team in the next few months. And if you have any questions about this sort of stuff, chat to Mel. And that is the last of the question side of things that I want to talk about. Now, did anybody have, I think we jump over into the Q&A stuff now, Paul, do we?
Yeah, pretty much. We've answered a few questions. There's none popped up yet, so either have a bit of a break or keep going or whatever you reckon.
No other questions about that sort of stuff? Other thing to mention is, we're more than happy anytime to if you have questions outside of this, like feel free to jump online or email me or something like that, and we can have a chat, and I'll try and, more than happy to fill people in where I can.
I have a question, and I don't know how to, I don't know if you can hear me, Paul and Adam.
Yeah, gotcha, mate.
Yep. And it's got to do with that land area stuff. And I suppose, I know you said it doesn't matter whether we've got 86,000 hectares or 46,000 hectares under the practice side of it. And I know you've answered it to me in the past and I've forgotten the answer, but how does it go when we're trying to meet the water quality target and we're saying X amount of nitrogen or sediment or whatever is coming from the cane farming practices? But one of the parts of the scheme is saying there's effectively double or 10,000 hectares more cane land than what there is. So I'm just trying to find out how that works, especially given that we're going to probably see in the last 7 years a 12 or 13,000 hectare decrease in cane land, in actual cane land harvest in our area, and it's all gone to other crops or pasture and that sort of stuff. And how do we keep this going there, because our numbers are dropping, our areas are dropping, and I suppose the targets aren't, or they don't seem to be dropping. So I'm just wondering how we will fit with that.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think about that. So I guess the thing that running through so the target is probably, you know, that's 60% reduction of DIN, or what, you know, if you look at there's some catchment specific ones. If you look in the water quality improvement plan, you'll see.
I can rattle them off, but that's irrelevant.
Yeah, that's irrelevant. So whatever that is, they're targets that are about marine impact. Like, so that's what the marine area needs to you know, achieve some thresholds around health and that sort of stuff. So they're you know, they're what they are. The thing probably that we need to make sure that we're really good about in terms of hectares, it's probably more about the impact of a practice change. So if we say, so the model will get run, right? And say it gets run, or this APSIM model gets run on 80,000 hectares in your region, okay? And it'll spit out and say there is this amount of DIN coming off that 80,000 hectares. What happens is that doesn't all gets transported to the waterways. What happens is they go, okay, well, we've got, yeah, let's say 1,000 tons of DIN, okay, coming out of APSIM. What we measure with bottles in, you know, particular places in the region is 50% of that, or 30% of that, okay? So that gets wound right back. What that probably means then, if we're going off 80,000 versus 40,000, is the impact of a change. So if we change the farm from, you know, whatever to what, C to B, let's say, that impact might be a little bit diluted on if we're modeling 80,000, but really there's only 40,000. So I think it is important. I'm pretty sure that in the model it's not 80,000. I'm pretty sure they cut a lot of area now.
Yeah, I think it was agreed for the Paddock to read 44,000 or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So a lot of area got cut out in the model. So that should, yeah. And you know, it's just a matter of trying to keep up with that stuff. Like, you know, down there, it's a real moving feast, and it's kind of hard in our world to keep changing the numbers, because it you know, if you keep dropping the number, it's sort of moving the goalposts a little bit. So yeah, this. I
suppose the other part to my question, Adam, and I probably didn't ask it well, was that, you know, for us, we're leaving cane and we're going to macadamias or sweet potatoes, and their particular, you know, and this is probably what's not being captured within the model itself, is that the cane farmers that are left are probably still having the same percentages in all the different practices. But as you move to macadamias or sweet potatoes, on average, you're dropping about 50 kilos of nitrogen per hectare per annum out of the system. And none of that gets captured because there isn't a horticultural, well, I don't believe there's a horticultural model that runs in conjunction. And so, yeah, we've lost, you know, in the Burnout Mary, say in the last 5 years, we've lost something like over 8,000 hectares of land. And if it assume it's all gone to cane and macas, you know, that's 400 tonne of nitrogen that's been reduced, applied to our area, which, you know, could potentially be 300 tonne of DIN, which is a fair way towards our targets of 470. And none of that side of it's getting captured. And that's what, you know, that's what I suppose I'm going to the next side of it is that we're not losing cane area that's just disappearing. We're losing cane area that is going to a different farm practice, and that change isn't being captured anywhere. And so our targets are staying abnormally inflated relative to what's, I suppose, in reality occurring.
So the DIN target map's not a cane target. It's a catchment target. So it recognises all land uses. So yeah, the management practice target's a cane one. There is a cane management practice target, but not necessarily a DIN target.
Oh, right. Sorry.
There's also, yeah, it's not written anywhere, but we do know that industry shouldn't own all of that target, and it is actually, it's part of the update to the MPA targets, is recognizing that, if there's a target in the burnout of 400 tons or whatever it is, we've got to work out what's realistic for industry to achieve, and then work out what the shortfall is. So that could be constructed wetland, something like that. So there's other things like that. Now, there is there's horticulture is modelled in a way in the model. Like it's not modelled like cane where we can manage the changes, but there's a thing in the model called an event mean concentration. So it basically says the model knows the model has the Q lump layer in it and says, okay, this is where horticulture is and that sort of stuff. And what it says is, okay, when it rains, we lose. There's a concentration of nitrogen in the water coming off horticulture of whatever that kind of is. So when it's raining lots, you get a lot of load. When it's raining not very much, you get small load. So it is all accounted for in the model. Those changes from cane across to something else, like some crops are using much less in terms of nitrogen rate. Some are using much more, and it's not land use in the model isn't handled really well. Like we try not to change the land use in that 5-year run, and it is hard to get a really good hold on that, particularly down there that's changing so rapidly.
Yeah, I'd probably add to that, Adam, too. Like we've done a bit of looking into horticulture throughout the whole GBR, but also more specifically in the Burnett Mary, and actually just trying to get an understanding of the total hectares of cane and horticulture is actually proving quite difficult. Even industry groups, multiple industry groups and data sources vary wildly from 10 to 12,000 hectares up to 30 to 40,000 hectares. And cane's the same, depending on whether you go to cane growers, A-Bears or Q Spatial, they all have vastly different hectares of those commodities. So yeah, it's a bit of a challenge, particularly if you want to spatially map it, not just a raw number of hectares.
Just Paul, just following up, it's Kevin Bowden.
Kev.
When the Q lump was updated, and Matt, you're involved in this process, we sort of tried to get all the cane productivity boards or mills involved, and unfortunately we weren't successful in getting Bundaberg Sugars all their land sort of updated. So there is definitely a shortcoming there. It did raise it with Fanti on this one, and I know they were sort of looking at whether they sort of try and introduce those tree crops in and horticulture into those models to try and fix some of this issue. So I think everybody's aware of it, but it's just coming up with a solution, because as you said, Paul, it's the industry bodies have got to really be part of this, I suppose, and want to cooperate. So.
Right.
Just a quick question, Adam. Sorry, John. Yeah.
Right.
When do you expect a change in the nutrient calculator or the nitrogen calculator? And will there be an inclusion of an irrigation model outside of the Paddock and further down the track?
I'm hoping that we'll have the projector updated in a few weeks' time. I'm meant to have a test version of the updates, putting more bands in this week. Then it's a matter of testing it, making sure it's sensible, the stuff that's happening, and then I've got to go through an approval process and be allowed to put it out. So I'm hoping in a couple of weeks' time we should be able to hit the go button on that. But the idea will be when it's ready, we'll send out an all communication to all users. So everybody who's registered on Projector will get an email saying this is what's happening, these are updates. We'll have some FAQs developed and a fact sheet and a few other bits and pieces. So I'll try and communicate it as well as we can. I don't know about the modelling, John. That's a Mel and Mike Silburn sort of thing. Like they're the ones that run the model. So yeah, I don't know at this stage. You know, they'll be up there in towards the end of the year talking to you guys again. So it's probably something to talk to them about. Then if there is a model built, then that comes over into Projector eventually.
Okay, thanks.
Just going to say, everyone, we're due for a 10-minute break now, so feel free to. Sorry, put my mic down. We're due for a 10-minute break, so feel free to step away. But Frank just has a question if anyone wants to hang around or whatever. But yeah, so back in 10 minutes, which will be at 11:25, and we'll head into the projector stuff. So yeah, fire away, Frank.
Cool. Hey, Adam, in regards to mill mud, could you share us, just like you did with the nitrogen there, could you share us the matrix that you have set for the mill mud and for the bands and how that moves?
Yep. So mill mud is pretty much let's go back. It is pretty much as you read. Okay, so we're looking, so really it's question 10. So the question 10, so 1.1 is obviously a 0 rate, no mill mud. I think 10.2 and 10.3 both apply similar amounts. It's sort of really, I think they both come into what we would call, if we split this into A, B, C, D, so 1.1 is going to be A, which A in the model just means nothing. B is going to be 2 and 3, and I think C is 4 and D is 5. And then dependent on the region, you get different rates. I think 2 and 3 will be, so it's going to be 50 to 70 tons. 4 is going to be 100 tons, and then 5 is going to be whatever. You're going to have. Whatever 150 or 200 or whatever the recommendation at the time was from the local group about whatever the rate is. Does that help, Frank?
Oh, not really, because what I'm trying to understand is when people are reducing, and their biggest change is really the mill mud, when they're reducing from, let's say, 100 to not applying at all, it spits out a large number in DIN savings. And when you try to do the mathematics, it's not physically possible, some of the numbers coming out.
Yeah, okay. So there's a default, there's some default numbers, so rates, and then there's a default N percentage in the mill mud. So I don't know, like it's very much a modeler question, but I don't know off the top of my head, but I think it's generally 100 wet tons is between 200 and 300 kilos of N, most of them, which some of the data I've seen is about right on. Some of the data is way under. So that's where the N's coming from, is that N that is in that mud. And you've got to remember that that's applied over, so you've got, the model runs over 40 years. So I think what it's doing is it's applying, if you're saying I'm putting on 100 wet tons, it applies that 100 wet tons every plant. So over 40 years, that's however many plants that you go through. So one every 6 or 7 years sort of thing. So you're running through a whole heap of plants there, and then you're looking at an annual average loss. So we do know that some years the losses from that 200 or 300 kilos of N from the mud are nothing, like because they're gone or somewhere else, or they're taken by the plant. In some years it's quite high, so you get some quite high losses. So that's kind of how mud works in the modelling.
How can we maybe get that modelling calculations because I just want to run it, see how it ends up. Because, like I said, some of these figures.
Do you have some numbers of what percentage N is in your mud?
Oh,
The mill should have some of that stuff because I think it's a lot.
I do have some specs of, yeah, I do.
Yeah, so it's pretty much that. So look at, if that's applied and you put on 300 kilos of N out of mud, there's a lot of carbon in that mud as well. So it does tie up and hold on to a lot of that mud, but a lot of that N is either immediately available or leaches out in a couple of years. So, a few hundred kilos of N. And I've seen numbers up to 1,500 in 100 tons. That stuff's like nitrogen is so water soluble, it just goes where water goes.
Yeah, I've heard there's still 30% in there somewhere too. So, yeah, I just probably, who's the best person to talk to about the calculation of that?
Of the mud,
yeah.
of how it's going. It's going to be the modelling team, so Mark and Mel, Mark Silburn and Mel Shaw.
All right, cool. Sure. What's Mark's surname?
Silburn.
Silburn and Mark. And what was the other guy's name?
Melanie Shaw.
All right.
So they're with the modelling team.
Yeah, that's really what I've got to do. Just get my head around how they did that model. Understand?
Yeah. So really, it just comes down to there's a lot of nitrogen in mill mud, and it's got to go somewhere. Like some of it, you know that like not all of it. I've heard of plenty of growers that go, oh well, you don't really see much from it in the first year, but then the years after you start to see a bit of a hit from it and that sort of stuff. But yeah, if you're putting on 100 wet tons and it's got 1,500 kilos of N in it, a lot of that is nitrate. Like there's going to be some of that's nitrate, which is immediately available to losses. Some of it's going to be, different forms of N, which have got to go through the breakdown cycle before they get released as a nitrate, to then become, plant available and water soluble and that sort of stuff. So it just really comes down to the more you put on, there's a lot of N in it.
So what were you saying? 1,500 kilos in
100 wet tons. Yeah, I've seen some pretty recent figures on that.
mill area is that? That's pretty high.
It's in the wet tropics.
The numbers I've got, they don't come anywhere near that, Adam. Two numbers I've got of N in 100 wet tons, 340 and 220, but that's.
Yeah, and I think it's really, it's going to be massively variable too, right? Like in a mill area, you've got however many different soil types and N rates and all sorts of stuff, and I imagine it varies throughout the year as well. So mud's not going to be 200 every single month of the year kind of thing, or 300. I'm pretty sure the model
1,500 is pretty big though.
1,500 is massive, but yeah, that's data that I've seen. I presume comes from a mill.
Yeah, that's a massive number, 1,500.
Yeah.
And so, are they applying these kind of numbers in the model?
No, they're applying. I'm pretty sure they're applying. It's about 200 to 300. Might be as high as 400. I think it comes down to that, but it's just a set percentage. That remember in the old beneficial use, whatever it was, beneficial use agreement, there was a band that nitrogen had to be in for mud. I think they sort of pick a middle number in there or about that sort of thing. So and go, oh well, if you're putting on 100 tons, then it's whatever percentage it is, and if you're putting on less, then it's whatever percentage that is.
Yeah, I'll try to touch base with them. Yeah, because hopefully they're not using a big number like 1,500. Is that?
No, they're not using 1,500. So 1,500 is not.
Yeah.
It was just data I seen in a
Yeah. Interesting.
presentation recently, and it blew my mind that it was 1500.
That was the mill advice. Oh, you don't know, because I suppose that's the thing. Like, if that's the mill advice, then they would say that the majority of their mud is spitting that out. But if it was just a random sample, then it's a hard thing to push that across the whole distribution.
Yeah, it'd be a random sample, I'd imagine. I'm not sure what the mill advice is, but I'm imagining it's the model's not putting 1500 out. I just know that it just does a random sample, and you get 1500 in a random sample is yeah.
See, the thing is, like, an example I would use for you is that one project's they've obviously gone from maybe 100 to 0, and their DIN savings pulled about, let's say, 50, 55 kilos of DIN a hectare.
Yeah.
It just seems too high.
Yeah. I know. Have to have a look at the underlying data to work it out, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. What we
sorry,
need.
I was just going to say we're due to hit the projector time now. So.
Oh, yeah, last thing. What I might do, Adam, is just get a few of these examples shown to you, and then you can analyse the data a little bit, because, like I said, they seem a bit too high.
Look, I reckon have a chat to, like, Mel and Mark will be up there, or Mel, in the next few months to reset the model and that sort of stuff. So I reckon the best thing is to have a chat to those guys.
Yeah.
Come up and get that, get it sorted out. Like, the other thing about mud also is whilst you say 55 kilos or whatever from the farm, mud's really different to fertilizer, in that 100 tons that you can apply to that hectare, it goes somewhere else in the catchment. Like, it doesn't just not exist like fertilizer. So it makes it a bit like how it works in Projector. You say, okay, I was applying mud and now I'm not, and I get this saving from not applying mud. That's true, probably, or within the realms on that farm, but across the catchment, that 55 kilos doesn't really exist in the catchment, because it just got transported to another part of the catchment.
Yeah.
The mill just doesn't go, oh, well, he's not applying it, so we just won't produce it anymore.
You understand?
Yeah. So I kind of think, like, mud in Projector in particular is not, I like the way it's handled, because it does give those things like this farm's getting a saving, which is not really true. It should be about creating a mass balance in a whole catchment.
Yeah, there is mud that goes outside the districts too, though, that you've got to realise gets moved to catchments also.
Yeah, I think they try and have a set amount of mud in the model. Like, okay, this mill's producing this much, and we think that 90 or 80% is being applied in the catchment.
Yeah.
We'll try and maintain that mass balance. So if that farm's not applying, we'll move it somewhere else. So.
Thanks.
Are we over time, Paul?
Oh, yeah, a little tiny bit. It's all good.
I presume everybody's back.
Hopefully. I was just going to quickly say, Maria asked a question about where to access, like, the questions and weightings and stuff. So there's a link in the chat box to our P2R Dropbox. But I just wanted to make a bit of a disclaimer that, as Adam's mentioned, we're in the process of reviewing targets, and that'll lead to a review of the questions and a few other things. So the stuff we're talking about today and what's available in that Dropbox is only current for another, 6 to 12 months, Adam, maybe a little bit longer? Maybe not.
6. I would say probably only a couple of months.
Couple of months.
Once the new targets, they could be relevant forever. They could be relevant for a couple of months. So.
Yep. So, but that's what we're using. Whatever the latest is what's in there. Yep.
Okay. Right. So next part I'm going to talk about is P2R Projector, or Paddock to Reef Project Selector. A lot of people have seen this, a lot of people have played with it, that sort of stuff. So I'll try and answer some questions about how it works, differences between it and Paddock to Reef, and I'll try and show you some of the stuff. We'll open it up in a little while and actually go into it and play with it. So I guess the first question is why? So as I said before, like my background came from NRM groups and from land care and all that sort of stuff. So back when first started thinking about this sort of stuff, we were being asked, we were getting funding off federal government to improve water quality. So in this case, we've got these targets in the blue boxes. We've got to do something about getting to that. Now, what we didn't really know, we had some practices that we could work on. We could do these sorts of things, but we really didn't know whether that project there was worth doing or that one there, which is the one that we should do first. Okay. We also we'd often run into a situation when I was with FBA, we'd be oversubscribed, way oversubscribed for the amount of money we had. So put out a grant, call for grants, people would come in and say, yep, these are the things we want to do. You'd add it up and go, wow, we're 20, 30%. The budget asked for is more, 20 to 30% more than what we actually had. So we just didn't really know. And from then I started thinking about, well, let's try and work out a way of making this easier for people on the ground. So just about everybody online, or most people in this space are funded or have funding to work towards these water quality targets here. The 60% reduction in DIN, that sort of stuff. The process used to be is you do your work, you'd put together a reporting, it'd come across to Paddock to Reef, we'd get it in July. It would take us about 12 months, sometimes 18, sometimes 2 years between when you handed that reporting over to by the time we'd analyse it, read all the reports, got all the approvals, and we published a report. So what that meant for people on ground is it could be 2 years between when the practice change actually occurred and whether you knew whether that practice change actually had any impact at all on the targets and the things at which you're funded for. So, it was a really difficult space. We also, we started going, okay, well, let's try and build a tool where people can punch in some information and get a really quick estimation about, is this going to be a useful thing to do for starters? Is it going to be a useful thing to do and going to contribute towards these targets? And then the second part is, I've got 2 projects, I can only work on one, which is the better one of those 2 to work on in terms of, value for money. The other thing is, there's so much really awesome stuff that Paddock to Reef does that most people just never ever seen. They'd see a report card which would have 1 or 2 numbers in it, and that was kind of it. We've got, some really cool stuff that was going to be useful. Just really want to take advantage of that. So hence why Projector. So a few years ago, I'm just trying to think, probably 4 or 5 years ago, we started doing, we built Cane first, and it's had a few revisions over time and updates, and it's developed over time, and there'll be a new one come out soon. Then we bought in bananas early, and it was a bit dodgy, and then grains, and then grazing. So we now cover cane, grains, bananas, and grazing. And we're still, making little tweaks here and there as we learn more about what's more useful and making it work better. So the big thing is P2R Projector is not the Paddock to Reef model. It is designed to be similar to the Paddock to Reef model. It's designed to be, if you get a result from Projector, you will most likely get a result in the Paddock to Reef model, but it is not the Paddock to Reef model. So the numbers, when it spits out and you say, I've made this practice change and I've saved 50 kilos of DIN, that is not what the model is going to say. Okay. When projects get put into Projector, and so they get reported to us through the reporting function in Paddock to Reef. We use the polygon, so the farm boundary, we use that, and we use the responses to the questions, and that's all we use. So the savings, the soil type, all that sort of stuff that Projector does, we don't use any of that. We do our own analysis and we run the big how leaky model. Okay. Another couple of things to point out before we dive too deep is we've tried to set up as much as we possibly can some support on the website. So there's some FAQs, there's some video tutorials. So there's a lot of videos in here on how to do this and talk through things. We've recorded training sessions we've done. So, you know, we'll run a training session when we do this update to Projector in a few weeks time, and we'll probably most likely put it up on this as well. FAQs about delivery ratios and that sort of stuff. So if you have questions, this is the first place to have a look in here. Then the next place is to probably come to myself or send a request through the contact form. Okay. Just for, so I'll just move into this. Okay, so I'm gonna run through now, just process it runs through, and then we'll have a play inside and I'll talk about a few other things there. So first things first, entering project. Punch in a project name. Also punch in, so ask for a description. It's not a compulsory area, but if you're going to use this for reporting to us, put in something that sort of helps us understand what this change is about. So, you know, such as develop a nutrient management plan, whatever, something like that. It just really helps when we're making an assessment of it to understand what we're looking at. So, you know, if we're seeing the project's about nutrient management plans, but we're seeing something over on the side about pesticides, we can come back and say to you down the track and say, oh, is this right, or is this just a typo in here? Okay, so this next one that comes up, so you enter your project ID and put a little description in there. The next thing that comes up is around funding. So we're talking about cash or in-kind, so days, and funding provider and funding program. So these funding provider and program are drop downs. Now, none of these are compulsory fields. So if you're just running through there, you can just drop things in, and you don't have to do anything in here. The reason that this is in here is like the cash side at the top here by you guys or the landholders is to help you. Perhaps you want to filter the results on cost effectiveness or something like that. So just some fields to enter that here. And this one about funding provider and program is really about being able to, if it gets reported to us distributing the project to the right program. So as you probably all know, is these funding groups, be it Queensland government, be it Australian government, whoever, they all want to know what they bought with their funding. It's all really important. The ministers, they just want to know what they bought with their funding. So we get a lot of requests from inside of government about, okay, well, what did this round of funding buy for different programs and that sort of stuff. So fill it out if you can, okay? It then opens up the questions about your different, so same as what we went through the questions, so it opens up the soil ones and the nutrient and that sort of stuff. So you'd run through here and fill them out before and after, all that sort of stuff. When we get to the nutrient one, you need to put in some values in plant cane. So this could be 75 and 0 or whatever, and need to put some values in for return cane as well. So you can leave these one here, without replant legume. You could leave those blank if you want, but you need values here, otherwise it won't calculate the result. Next thing it does, we ask you to put in a map. So, we zoom in on the map to our location. We draw a polygon in. And if we've done everything right, at this stage, we'll get this box that says save and exit. Now, if this box is grey, it means that somewhere back here in one of these questions, you've missed a question there. So generally it'll come up grey. So in this case here on the page 4 is grey, so it means there's some missing information here. Now I know that this one is actually this nutrient one, and it's going, oh, there's some missing questions here, which is fine. And that's why I've got an orange box here and I can hit save and exit. So if you ever get to this and you can't save and exit, it means that there's missing information back here. So you need to go back and click on that and fill in the missing information. Runs through, does some magic. You press that, you know, thinks for a couple of seconds and it spits out some numbers, which is all really cool. And then, you know, if you keep adding projects in, you keep this up the top here. Up in the top right here is the cumulative of all the projects you have selected. And then down the bottom here is you can start looking at the individual ones. So the more projects you put in, the more savings and all that sort of stuff. So what's it doing? It's doing the same thing as what we run through. So you've answered those questions, you get a 22 before, you've made a change, you get a 42 before. You know, we look at this and we go, okay, here's all of these. This is what it looks like before. So we're looking at the before run is this one. We've got a code for the before AppSim run. We've made some changes. Now we've got another code for the AppSim run. So so the data that it's using is the AppSim data from the P2R model. It's just aggregated up very differently to what the P2R model does. So the AppSim data in the model, like I said, it's a daily model. So every day it actually grows a crop. So AppSim grows a crop. Every day something happens in the model. So, you know, it either rains or, you know, the leaf elongates by however mils, it takes up a certain amount of water and a certain amount of nutrient, that sort of stuff. Something happens in the model. This has been aggregated up to, and then it is actually run pretty much on every single block in the that's in QLump. What this does is we just aggregate that right up. So we're going, okay, of all of those, you know, everyday 40-year data points that are in there, we just want to know what the annual average is. So that gets compressed down. So we go, okay, the annual average for that type of management is this. Now, we've got quite a number of soils in there. So we aggregate to the soil type as well. We've got a number of climates in there. We aggregate to the climates and we aggregate to the catchment. So what we end up with is a data cube that has the managements, it has soil type, climate, and catchment. So they're the different things in there. The other big thing is that we don't represent every single soil type. So if you imagine in a particular catchment, let's pick, you know, the Burnett. If you want to dig down into individual soil types, there's probably a dozen, there's probably 20, it could be 50 kind of individual soil types that are just a little bit different. We don't represent every single one of those. Usually, so what we do is we roll them up to functionally similar soils. So, you know, we're talking about soils that perform fairly similarly in terms of, you know, how crop will grow in them, in terms of, you know, how nutrients move from, how water moves from, and that sort of stuff. So usually 5 to 6 per catchment, sometimes 4, depending on the diversity of soils in a particular catchment. So it is a little bit different there in terms of the data. It starts life as the AppSim data. We condense it down. And the reason we do that is that the AppSim model takes about 3 weeks to run. So to model a particular catchment takes about 3 weeks to do that on the supercomputer at Environmental Sciences Precinct down at Boggo Road in Brisbane. You know, one of the biggest, most powerful computers in the state. Takes 3 weeks. We can't do that for you guys. So we wanted to have something that was quick and you could get a result back almost instantly. So we've had to compress down to make something that is quick and still relatively useful for people. So how does it work? Okay, so we've created a project. we fill out the management survey. So I went through, showed, so we created that project, we put in a project ID, we filled out a description, we've set this funding source. We go to the management survey, we've entered the soil ones, we put in our rates and yields and all that sort of stuff. Pops over, the next screen comes up, we've got a map, we go zoom in on wherever we're looking for, we draw the map in, we hit go, and all of a sudden it spits out some predictions. So the first thing, so they just went through there, practice survey, it's going through there, it's going, okay, you're a 22 before for soil and now you're a 42, so you've gone from C to a B and that sort of stuff. So we get that code that corresponds to an axiom one. From the mapping, we get a soil. So sitting underneath this, we have soil and climate. So we get a soil from the map. When you draw that in there, it looks up and says, okay, you're on this soil type and you're in this climate zone, which is basically comes down to rainfall. Looks like this. So this is just an example we have. So what we've done is we've tried to take the finest scale soil mapping that's available. So the soil boundaries here will be the finest scale available. And I think this is in the Burdekin. So in the Burdekin irrigation area, there was quite a lot of really detailed soil mapping done. So the soil mapping in that area is pretty good. Other areas have almost no soil mapping done or soil surveys done. So the soil maps are indicative best. So you'll see here what this does when we draw this in. It's going to actually split this up into each one of these soils is a say this is each one of these soils here is one of the five or six soils that in the model. It'll split this up into 5 or 6 different projects in there. Okay, so that gives us a climate and a soil. So we're combining. We now have through the survey and the mapping. We know which climate we're in. We know which soils we're on. And we know what the practice survey is and the region that we're in as well. Okay. We have this data cube that sits in the back. So across the top here, we have these AEF, AF, AF. So we have all the different management combinations that are sitting there. Okay. So we're going, whatever this practice change survey was, it gives us a management code. We can find that. Then down the side here, this other code here, this is telling us the region, the soil, the climate, and it also tells us the constituent. So as you know, it's generating DIN, soil, and pesticide load. So this here is telling us the different constituents that are in there. So using the codes and the soil, we're able to then zoom in. So for whatever this combination is, we end up with a loss of 2.63, and this is 1, so this would be soil, 2.63 tons of sediment loss per year, on average per year. Okay, so this is a per hectare number as well. So we measure this polygon. So the polygon there, we go, okay, well, that's whatever it is, 100 hectares. So it's this number times by 100. That gives us our initial losses. So if you go into the detailed results, you'll see there's a before and after. This is giving us a before losses for that polygon. We then run through this whole process again. This process down the bottom for the new practice for the after soil, the after change survey. So we're going to have a before and after set of codes. So we would look it up again. So say this changes over to here somewhere. So we end up with this 2.25. So we would then go and we have that before sediment load. Now we have an after sediment load. The difference between the two is the same. Okay, now I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and open projector, and we'll have a play in projector itself. Okay. That's sharing projector now, Paul, or you're on mute. I presume you said
Yeah,
yes.
that's yeah. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Slow on the mark.
So website p2rprojector.net.au, bring you to this landing page here. Okay, so on this, just need to go to my notes, make sure I cover everything. Okay, so on this landing page here, we have a few links, so you don't need to log in to get to here. You know, inquire now, a few things about pricing. So essentially pricing for this is, these are the pricing here that were indicative at this stage, but what we're saying right now is you are contracted by, you know, Queensland or Australian government or GBRF or one of the organisations out there to do practice change projects on behalf of one of the government using government funding, then you will get free access to Projector at this stage, or you will get free access. Okay. Across the top here, we have some links about different things. So we go support, tutorials. This is where I was saying we have all of these videos that you know, you can start looking at. You can watch these videos and they tell you about managing users, exporting results, how to manage collections, how to add projects, surveys, all this sort of stuff. So, you know, there's lots of good information here. We try to add as much stuff in here as we possibly can. Some FAQs. So like I said, if you have questions and unsure about things, come here first. If not, if you can't find them, contact us or email myself. I think my email's in here somewhere, I can't remember. So yeah, lots of information here that's worth that you should go and have a look at and make sure you sort of understand about how it works, some limitations and that sort of stuff, what it is and what it isn't, links to the different modelling approaches, some discussion about the modelling approaches, all that sort of stuff. Right, so we sign in. The sign in brings you to a different page. You can go back to learn about this tool. So if you hit this, this will take you back to that existing tool, that web page that we were at just before. So we'll go log in. Now, when you first log in, you'll get a pop-up that has some disclaimers and stuff about this. Every subsequent time you come in, I'm pretty sure the first time you log in, you've got to check a box or something like that. Every subsequent time, it's like a reminder. And I don't know whether people can read that. I can't. So basically, these are limitations. So you need to accept this each time you come in. So it's a decision support tool. Outputs are selected from available model runs. We don't always have the exact model run that you have entered. If we don't have the exact one, we go to the next available one. Tool accesses existing model data. So, you know, sometimes there's granularity between those runs. So sometimes we can't represent every practice change. Like we're working on trying to fix that. But sometimes there'll be a practice change and it's just not enough to move it into that next band. So you get no result. Doesn't mean that, yeah, you get no result basically, which we know that that's not correct, but it's what we can represent at this time. So we hit accept. Now, when you come in, you won't have really anything here. You'll have load collection. So you hit this and this will list all of your collections over here. So you can go and select the different collections that you're interested in. Over on this right-hand side, next to your name, there's a little drop-down arrow. So this will show you all of the groups that you're a member of. So you can only see data from a group you're a member of. And that includes me. So I'm a super user. I have way more access to stuff than anybody else. And I can only see groups. I can only see data from the groups I'm a member of. So these are the groups that I'm a member of. There is 50, 60 groups, something like that in there. And I can only see data from these ones here. If you hit about, this will take you back to that initial landing page again. So if you get to this page spot and you can't remember how to do something, you want to have a look at a tutorial, hit this about button, it'll bring a pop-up. You can go to the tutorials and have another look at it. Manage account. This is where you can change password. If you want to change your password for whatever, I don't believe you guys have your groups and manage metadata. That's something just for me. So yeah, you can go there. So I am going to go to my group, which I've called example training group. So this is just the one that I put training stuff in here we can look at. And I'm going to go to, so from here, I can either open up one of my existing groups. So I've got this one here, which I called October Training B2. So I've got some projects in here. It'll zoom to whatever extent my projects are. So it looks like this one here, I've only got these projects in. So it's zoomed to there. If I go to a different one, it'll take me to different, I can sort of scroll through all of my different groups that I have in here. But what I'm going to do is we're going to create a new collection. So if I hit on this arrow, I've got a couple of options here. So obviously I can select a group. Okay, I can create a new collection or I can import a collection. So importing a collection, and if you see hover over that, I can import a GeoJSON file or a zipped up shape file. And that, say I have farm data that's currently sitting in a database that's sitting on my computer, I can import that in here and it will bring in, if it's all of the questions are filled out, it'll bring it in. If none of the questions are filled out, it'll bring it in. It'll bring that sort of stuff in there. Now with this importing collections, it needs to have, if you want all of the, so a common question I get is, I've got a layer from the mill and it has, so I've got a farm layer which has come from the mill. You know, this particular farm's got 15 blocks. So each of these blocks have got their own ID, but I just want it all as one farm. In that instance, make sure you have a field in your shapefile that is called project underscore ID. Okay, all one word, so project underscore ID. If you bring that in and that farm all has the same project ID, P2R1 or whatever you're going to call it, it will group that all together as one farm with multiple blocks in it. If it doesn't have that field in there that's called project ID, it'll split that farm into the 10, 12, 15 individual blocks. It'll create whole new farms for it. And there's no way to recombine it. So combine it outside of Projector before you bring it in. Okay, create a new collection. This will pop up. We give it a name, training, Feb 2000. We can select a default industry. Now with default industry, we can set this at whatever we want. It just means that when we say create a project, it will automatically go towards cane. But we can have in a collection, we can have all of these. So we can have cane, banana, grazing in there. Or you can just have cane. It doesn't really mind. We can set a default funder. So, you know, we'll say Australian government and we'll just grab something random. So we've now created a collection. So I like to think of collections as folders. So your folder is called Training Feb 2022. And then the projects that sit in there are files. So that's the way I sort of think about it. So inside of a collection, you can have multiple projects sitting in there. Same as inside of a folder, you can have multiple files sitting in there. Okay, so we've gone, we've created a collection, we've selected it. Now we want to add a project. We're going to type in Give it a name. We're going to add a description. It's going to be cane. We're going to work. We're not going to add. See, because I added that default funding provider, it's automatically populated that. So I don't have to go looking if I add that into the collection as the default. We're going to move through here. I'm going to lots of change into this. Some realistic stuff in here because I know that this will generate a result. No, I've done yield. Hang on, let's go. We'll leave mill mode off. Go through. About this. Okay, so it asks about irrigation. We're not going to irrigate. We'll go somewhere it's not. Okay, so now we go and find our farm that we're looking for. Just select a random farm here. We've drawn it in. Now, so I've drawn in my first block here, but say my farm actually has another block over here. I can add a second one in here. I can add another one in if I want to. So I can do this as many times as I want. Now this is saying all the management of this is the same. I've actually gone, oh, actually, no, the management of that's not the same. So I want to delete one. So I wanted to remove that one now. Okay, or actually, this one's slightly changed. Like the shape of this one's a little bit different. I've gone a bit far, so I can hit this pencil tool and I can reshape. Save. So it's going through, it's looking at those changes, it's working out what the code is, it's looking up the different soils and climate, and it's coming back with a sediment saving here. So no gin saving, which is interesting. And we've got a huge sediment saving and some pesticide saving, which is linked to this sediment saving. Okay. So I can go through, add more projects into this. So the next thing we want to look at here is whether we've gone through, we've entered all our projects in here. Now, if I had multiple projects, and let's go and see whether one of these has multiple projects in it. That one doesn't have multiple projects. Okay, so this one has multiple projects. I've got some up here and I've got some down here as well. Okay. If I hit select, it will show me, and these are all grazing ones, I presume, but if I hit select, so default will be none of them will be selected. If I hit select all, it'll select all of the projects. It's going to show me I've got 7 projects in this collection. Total in fine sediment pesticide of this, and it lists all the projects down the bottom here. So I can click on this plus button beside it. I can see there's only one project there. Now, I hit zoom to, it'll zoom to that particular project. I can edit this from now. So I've got a grains industry project here. I can look at this and I can edit it if I feel like it. I can zoom to a different one. I can move around in here and look at those. So, and the thing I can do here is I can sort. So if I'm interested in DIN, I'm going, okay, what's the biggest one? So the biggest one is this one here. Say, or these are all the same cost. I might be interested which is the biggest bang for buck. So I'm getting the biggest one from here, and I might prioritize this one before I sort of move my way down to these other ones. We go back to original collection. So from this, select these. So from this export side, I can export the spatial data. So if I click on this, it'll give me GeoJSON spatial data with the boundary and all the questions and stuff filled out. So if I want to bring those over onto my system, I can do that. If I hit detailed results, it'll download a little file down here. It'll open up which I can then open and loads. Hey Paul, are you still seeing my spreadsheet, or are you seeing?
Still seeing projector.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought I was sharing a particular project rather than a spreadsheet.
Green.
Yep, just changed that. So I'll go back to here and share screen too. So I've gone through, I've downloaded I've downloaded the detailed results from that selection that I did. It's got 2 blocks in that detailed result. We drew in the 2, so it gives me, in the detailed results, it's giving me a record for each one of those blocks. I've got the project title here. So this is, a lot of this stuff's just code that the group need, that the site needs. So I can see my project title here. I can see my description. So just mash the keys, it's there. Go across, I can see coded values against the question. So question 1, the first thing I put in was 1.1, and then I changed it to 1.3. So they're, as I was showing before, like you've got those coded values. So I can see here all the responses to the questions that I've made. I can see where my practice change is. If I zoom, if I scroll right over here, I can see where I made practice change. So I've gone from soil B, so soil before, soil A, soil after. So I went from CP to a BF. Nutrient, I didn't actually make any change. I must have put this outside of a band or inside of a band, those changes. So I've gone from C full to C full. Then right over this side here, we start seeing some of these numbers here, which is soil after, soil before per hectare, soil after per hectare, soil reduction, and a soil delivery ratio. So before, this project was losing 32.7 tonnes. After, it's losing 13.7, so a reduction of 19, and a delivery ratio of 0.38%. So basically saying of this, only just under 40% is actually making it to the mouth of the catchment. The rest is being held up in, dropped out in the stream or that sort of stuff. Runoff DIN, drainage DIN, total DIN, and then pesticide. So these are diaron equivalents: pesticide load before, pesticide load after. So let's get rid of that. So that's the detailed results. So that's, if you want to see what's going on and why there isn't any change in a particular project, have a look at the detailed results. And if you're in this case here, we didn't see any DIN saving, and it's because it was CF before as management and CF after as management.
Adam, if
Okay.
we go back to earlier in the presentation when you're talking about all the different soils mapped on a property, if you've got more than one soil type, you'll also see multiple entries in that one. Is that right?
Yeah, so you see, you don't see multiple entries. You see, it's a bit hard to sort of pull it apart. You see multiple soils. So if we look over here, at this section here, we start seeing code 0. So you have a code this one here is soil. So code 0 soil. And then if we move over, so this one's only got one soil. So generally what you would see is you would have another code. So you'd have code 1 soil, which would be in here somewhere, and then code 2 soil and code 3 soil. So it'll just go through. This one here has only got one soil in it. So. Okay, so next few things. So we can go a block level summary table. So this will just give you some really high level info about savings at a block level. So this might be useful if you're looking at a farm and trying to work out, you know, which parts of the farm are losing more than other parts. So, so this one here, we can start looking at, and gives you the look at the savings from that particular project, gives you the DIN before and after, the DIN saving here. So this is just a high level sort of thing, and the other one, close that. So project level is the one that is open. So that gives you everything for the project. And if I did the same thing for block, it would give you for the different blocks. So each block has its own ID, and it would give you the same information for each block there. Okay, so exports. Now the other thing we can do here is we click on this little box beside the project. So say I had multiple projects here and I wanted to work out which one was which. We go back to the other collection. So, and we zoom in here where I've got a whole heap of collections, okay? And I'm not sure which, like I can hover over and see them, but I want to see, I'm looking here and I'm actually going, which one's project 3? If I click on that, it'll highlight project 3 for me. And then I can also unselect that and I bust it out into its different blocks. I can click on the individual block and I can see that block in that particular project. Okay, so from here, I can actually delete blocks as well. So if I wanted to delete that, I hit delete. The other thing I can do is I've gone, oh, actually, I want this one. This one's currently in this collection. Okay, so I've got it in my second collection, but actually what I want is I want a copy of this move. So I can either move it totally or I can create a copy and put it in a new collection. So in this case, we're going to move it. I'm going to hit move. I'm going to put it into training Feb, the one that we just did. I'm going to hit move. So that project's gone from this collection now. But if I go over into training Feb, it's now there. So I can move things around within. Yeah, if I selected that one decided I could have created a copy, so I can copy that back to where I just had it. My collections, so copy it back. Still want to do. So there's sort of most of the basic functions around Projector. Like I said, go and have a look in the about if you have any other questions. But what I might do is I might jump back to my slideshow because I think I'm running out of time, aren't I, Paul? But how long do I have? 10 minutes?
Yeah, got 10 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, so we've had a look at Projector. So you're seeing my presentation now, Paul?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so some key differences between Projector and Paddock to Reef. So as I covered before, the data is presented as an annual average in Projector. So it's not saying this is what you have saved this year. It's saying if you did this project 40 years ago, the annual average saving would have been this. So you got to remember over that period, that 40 years backwards, we've got dry times and we've got wet times. So when it rains lots, you get lots and lots of runoff and that sort of stuff. So sometimes you get really high losses, sometimes you get really low. It's back there. The data that it's looking up is aggregated data. So the main one is running it daily. It's a little, so that when you transport those daily losses, you know, if you get a bigger rain event and a big river flow, you get a lot more of those losses get out to the mouth of the river. This is aggregating it to a catchment. So big rain event, it doesn't know what the river's doing. So it's just going, oh, well, on average, we're getting this sort of losses out to the mouth of the river. It doesn't account for overlap. So I can open up Projector, I can draw the same project on the same block of land 100 times with the same projects, and it will just cumulative add it all up. So if I make a practice change on a farm and that's 10 kilos of saved in, if I copy it onto the same, if I draw it again, and 20, if I draw it again, I'll do it 10 times, end up with 100. Like it doesn't know about overlaps. In our world, in Paddock to Reef, we would account for that. So if we get it often, we get a farm that's worked with one person to do this thing, and then another person's come in and done it, you know, the same thing. So the first person might have moved them from C to B, and the next person moved them from B to A. We account for that all the way through. Or the next person might come in and say, well, I moved them from C to B as well. So we don't double count that ever. The other thing that we do in Paddock to Reef world that Projector doesn't is if a farm has already, that practice change has already been reported. So 2 years ago, a farm turned up with us and they said, we've moved this person from a C management to a B management. They turn up again in this year's data, we won't double count that movement from C to B. So we won't model it again. We won't count it towards the targets because we're saying, well, that's already a B. The results that it spits out are unverified in terms of in Paddock to Reef, we will, if a project, say a project comes in and they drop their N rate by 20 kilos, okay? And that hasn't actually resulted in them moving a band. Projector will say 0, but what we do is we look at all of the projects and we look through them and we go, okay, oh, just this one here's got a big band shear. Like that one's got quite a large amount of practice change, but for whatever reason, they've stayed with inside that band. We actually force them to move a band. So we'll move them up and we'll go, okay, well, that actually should have moved the band. So let's model this as though it moved a band. So we'll force that to happen. So that's a pretty big thing. So, you know, it accounts for quite a lot of the changes we see. And, you know, Projector takes minutes to produce a result, and it takes us a year. Like we go through quite a lot of process. We have to have all of our results verified by the independent science panel. They review everything, go through multiple rounds of review before our stuff's published. So Projector is really built about a really quick, rapid look to say, is this thing worth doing? And if it is worth doing, is it better than that thing over there? Something I can't see anymore. So Ted Bowden's just asked, is it possible to put a flag in projector that notifies if a block has been previous practice change that will conflict? So we've been asked this a lot about that overlap. It's a tricky thing for us because it wouldn't take a real long time of being in there to work out who's had funding or not if you put a flag against people that's done practice change. So it's kind of might you know, it may be in breach of data privacy sort of stuff. So we'd love to really help out with that, but we sort of discussed this morning about data privacy and who owns the data. We see this as the landholder's data, and it's not our place to share it with anybody. So we can't do that currently in Projector. What we are adding into Projector is the ability for you to load up projects that you already have in there and then run a process where you do this overlap checking. So you can put in to different projects and go, okay, well, what did I see previously? What have I already funded? What am I going to fund this time? Where is there conflicts in this practice change? Is that C2B available on that particular farm? So we are working on an update like that through too. Okay, so coming update. So there's a couple of fairly, there's a few updates coming in the next few weeks. One, well, actually the collection one will be a little bit later. So we're working on, I think when you open up your collections, it's a big long list. So well, some of the NRM groups and groups like myself and GBRF, they have multiple collections. So that list becomes really long and becomes quite hard to manage it. So we're working on turning that more into your file structure so you can have folders and subfolders and that sort of stuff. So you might say, these are my 2022 projects, and these are Adam, you could have a folder that says 2022 projects, and then you can have another folder in there that says Adam's 2022 projects. So you can sort of nest things. So we're working on that to hopefully help people better manage those collections. Well, actually, it's mostly to help me better manage my collections, but it's probably useful for other people as well. There will be some field name relines to just better renames to better align with existing databases. So there's some issues now coming out of some of the databases that don't load properly because of some missing fields. And the big one is more steps. So we're in the process now of doing an interpolation between the steps. So we have those 6 steps currently in, say, nutrient management, okay? And we have these bands that say if you have a nitrogen risk of 1 point, between 1.1 and 1.4, let's say, you fit with inside this band. What we're doing is we're interpolating some points in between that. So basically it will come down to, if you are 25% of your way between the C and the B band, you'll get 25% of the benefit. If 75%, you'll get 75% of the benefit. What that should mean is that it becomes sensible or sensitive to N rate changes. We're looking at trying to make it sensitive to N rate changes about around that 5 kilo mark. And then same thing with yield changes. So if we can get it yield changes sensitive to plus or minus a few tons sort of thing, then we should be able to represent some of those changes better. Because we very much recognise that there is times when you're dropping 10, 15, 20 kilos of N in a particular project in Projector currently, that you're not seeing a result. And that's not what, we know that that's not right in there. If you're reducing the amount of nitrogen applied, theoretically, there's less nitrogen surplus there. There's less nitrogen surplus. There's less chance of that being lost into the environment. And that's me. Any questions from people
Cool.
about that
Yep.
sort of stuff?
Bang on
And
time.
look, bang on time. Like I said, if people have more questions, feel free to give us a ring. Best person for questions around Projector is myself. If you haven't got my email or phone number, somebody will have it. If not, just jump into I'll put my email in this when this gets sent around, because I presume we're going to share these. So anyways, if you don't have my email, just jump on Projector, put it into the comments, into the contact us, and that I get a copy of that as well. So any questions, hit me up. And question from Kev Bowden, additional funding streams out of the drop down. Yes, you can. You just got to talk to me. I can do that. You just got to keep bugging me to do it. No other questions?
Cool. Must have been top level presentation. No questions.
I think everybody's just gone to sleep.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, guys.
Yeah. Let's wrap it up then, I guess.
Yeah, something to eat.
Sounds great. Well, yeah, thanks everyone for attending. And as we've sort of mentioned several times, don't be afraid to contact us for any questions or information, etc. Might see you in another session.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.